He slid the prenup across my granite counter like it was a dinner menu. "Sign it, or the wedding's off," he said. And behind him, his entire family nodding, like this was some kind of intervention. But it wasn't just about the money. That contract had a clause that gave his mother veto power over my business decisions. My $12 million company, handed over for love. That's when I knew. They weren't marrying me. They were robbing me in slow motion. What they didn't know? I already filed a copy of that prenup next to a legal document of my own. One that ends their little performance, publicly. And when the cameras show up on my wedding day, everyone's gonna learn who really wrote the final vows. My name is Aisha Monroe, and I'm 45 years old. Every morning, I lace up steel-toed boots and inspect construction sites before most people have their first coffee. After my husband, Tom's death 6 years ago, I transformed his struggling 3-man crew into Monroe Construction, now a $12 million operation. The concrete dust and blueprint rolls feel like old friends. Derek Williams, my fiancé and local middle school principal, brought laughter back into my life. His mother Margaret, a silver-haired financial advisor with perfect posture, watches me at Sunday dinners with sharp eyes, commenting on proper family dynamics while stirring her tea. What they don't know is that I spent 3 years taking night courses in business law. Every contract, every conversation, every casual suggestion about my company, I document it all. But let me start from the beginning. The dinner party was my idea, a small celebration at my home to mark 6 months until the wedding. I'd spent the afternoon making Tom's famous jambalaya recipe, the scent of andouille sausage and cayenne, wrapping around the kitchen like a warm blanket. You know that comfort you feel when everything seems right with the world? That's where I was, right up until Derek cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, setting down his wine glass, "I've been thinking. Why wait 6 months? We could do this in 3 weeks, while the weather's still nice." I froze mid-stir, catching Margaret's tight smile from across my granite countertop. The suggestion hadn't come from Derek at all. I could read that in the way his fingers drummed against the tablecloth. 3 weeks? I kept my voice neutral. That's quite a change in plans. Margaret dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Aisha, dear, might I have a word? In private?" We stepped into my home office, where she produced a crisp manila folder labeled Prenuptial Agreement in precise black lettering. My stomach clenched, but I kept my face smooth as silk. "Given your considerable assets," Margaret said, "we feel this is necessary to protect everyone involved." The way she emphasized considerable made it sound like something dirty. I nodded slowly, noting her exact words, the careful positioning of we instead of I. "Of course," I replied. "I'll need time to review this." Back at the dinner table, Derek's sister Renee leaned in close. "It's just smart business, you know? Women with wealth like yours. You're targets for all sorts of lawsuits these days." She said it like she was doing me a favor, sharing insider knowledge. Their Uncle Calvin, who I'd learned was a corporate lawyer, chimed in from across the table. "The legal system's brutal on successful black women," he added. "This protects you too, Aisha." I watched Derek's face as they spoke, catching the rehearsed quality of it all. When everyone left, he pulled me close in the kitchen. "Baby, it's just a formality," he whispered against my hair. "You know how Mom gets about financial stuff. She manages everything for the family." Later that night, after Derek headed home, I spread the prenup across my desk. 20 pages of legal language I wouldn't have understood 6 years ago. But those night classes after Tom died had taught me plenty. My eyes caught on phrases like full surrender of business control in event of dissolution and relinquishment of independent financial decisions during marriage. Every clause was a trap, every paragraph a cage. They hadn't just asked for protection, they'd drafted a document to strip me of everything I'd built. When Derek called to check on me, I kept my voice steady. "I'll consider it," I said, already tucking a copy into my filing cabinet. The original went into my safe, right next to Tom's old business, ledgers. "Trust me." Derek said before hanging up. The words fell heavy in my quiet house. I sat at my desk, the one where I'd signed my first major contract after Tom passed. A yellow legal pad waited in front of me, pen uncapped. All those nights studying contract law, all those careful records I'd kept, they'd led me to this moment. I wrote a single word in block letters. Why? The next morning, I was at my desk before the sun, armed with coffee and a red pen. You know how sometimes the quiet helps you see things clearer? That's what dawn does for me, strips away the noise until there's nothing but truth on the page. The prenup read like a masterclass in manipulation. Section after section designed to separate me from my company, my assets, even my decision-making power. Ever notice how the devil's always hiding in the details? Take section 4.3. In the event of marital dissolution, all business assets acquired prior to marriage shall be subject to equal distribution if commingled with marital funds. Translation? The moment I used a single penny of married money in my business, half of everything would be up for grabs. I circled another gem in Section 7. Spousal support shall be limited to 12 months regardless of marriage duration. Right below that, a clause requiring me to maintain Derek's accustomed standard of living if he left his job for the benefit of the marriage. The hypocrisy made my coffee taste bitter. Around 8, I called Derek. Kept my voice light, like I was just curious. Hey, baby, quick question about the prenup. Who put this together? Oh, Uncle Calvin handled all that, he said, distracted. I could hear his car radio in the background. He's got tons of experience with these things. Why? Something wrong? I stirred my third cup of coffee, watching the cream make patterns. Just trying to understand some of the language. Maybe we could go through it together? Aisha. His voice shifted, got that soft, disappointed tone that always made my chest tight. If you loved me, you'd trust me. This isn't about the money. It's about faith in us. My stomach knotted up like a fist, but I kept my voice steady. You ever notice how manipulators always try to make their victims feel guilty for having boundaries? I hear you, I said carefully. I'll consider everything carefully, I promise. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, letting his words settle. Then I picked up my phone and texted Mrs. Turner. Coffee tomorrow morning? Need your perspective on something important. She'd been my mentor since Tom died, taught me everything about running a construction empire. More importantly, she'd survived 3 gold diggers of her own. At my desk, I drew a simple decision tree on a fresh legal pad. Branch 1. Sign the prenup, marry Derek, risk everything. Branch 2. Refuse to sign, end the engagement, protect my assets, but lose what felt like my last chance at love. Branch 3. This one I drew with a heavier hand, verify before deciding. The thing about love is, it can't erase risk, and risk doesn't eliminate the need for due diligence. Tom taught me that back when we were first starting out. Trust is good, he used to say, but verification is better. I spent the next hour photographing every page of the prenup, making sure the timestamps were clear. The original went into my office safe, right next to the company's founding documents. My red-marked copy went into a fresh folder labeled Project Phoenix. Seemed fitting, given how often I'd had to rise from ashes. As I closed the safe, my eyes caught the old photo of Tom and me at our first groundbreaking. His smile was so proud, his hand steady on the shovel. He'd taught me to double-check every contract, verify every claim, document everything. Paper trails, he'd say, are better than breadcrumbs. I reached for my phone again, scrolling through contacts until I found the number I needed. James Chen, the forensic accountant who'd helped sort out Tom's estate. He'd know how to trace financial patterns without raising flags. The sun was setting now, painting my office in shades of amber and shadow. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. Tomorrow before sunrise, I make a call. At 5:07 a.m. sharp, I dialed Mr. Alvarez's number, knowing he'd be at his desk already. Some habits don't change. He'd been my late husband's numbers man for 20 years, always first in the office, last to leave. Aisha, he answered on the second. Ring. Been a while since our last chat. How's the company? Profitable and clean, just like you taught us. I smiled, remembering how he'd drilled proper bookkeeping into Tom and me when we were just starting out. But I need your other skill set, the quiet kind. There was a pause, then the soft click of his office door closing. Go on. I need a background check. Thorough but invisible. Family financials, property records, tax, histories, everything public, but I let the sentence hang. But requiring certain expertise to find, he finished. This about the new man? His whole family, actually. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd been filling with observations since that prenup landed. They're pushing a marriage contract that feels wrong, like they're hunting, not protecting. You know that sound accountants make when they're thinking? That little that says they're already connecting dots? Mr. Alvarez made that sound, then asked, Document trails rarely lie, Aisha. Names and dates? I gave him everything I'd gathered. Derek's full name, his mother Margaret's address, his sister Renee's business ventures, Uncle Calvin's law firm. Dates of property purchases I'd overheard them mention. Names of organizations they were involved with. Even the school where Derek worked as principal. Give me 3 days for preliminary findings, he said. Meanwhile, don't change anything in your routine. Best cover is normal behavior. Smart man. I'd already thought of that. Got a florist meeting at 10, cake tasting this afternoon, playing the happy bride-to-be. Good. Keep it natural. I'll call when I have something. After hanging up, I dressed carefully. Coral silk blouse, pearl earrings Tom gave me for our 5th anniversary. The perfect outfit. For picking flower arrangements with my future mother-in-law, I'd learned long ago that appearance matters when you're setting a scene. Margaret was already at the florist when I arrived, examining white roses with the intensity of a diamond appraiser. Darling, she said, air-kissing my cheek, I was just telling Sandra here about proper wedding etiquette. You know, in established families. I nodded, added the comment to my mental file. Every little dig, every subtle reminder that I wasn't established enough, all documented in a password-protected folder labeled Wedding Notes. The next few days fell into a pattern. Cake tastings where Margaret lectured about wives knowing their lane. Venue tours where she reminded me how lucky I was that Derek chose me. I smiled through it all, playing my role while Mr. Alvarez worked his magic. His first call came during a meeting with my project managers. Preliminary findings, he said when I stepped out. Multiple red flags on the mother's property. 2 refinances in 18 months, second mortgage last quarter. Pattern suggests cash flow problems. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice soft. Verification? Working on it. Public records show tax liens, but they disappeared suddenly 6 months ago. Want me to dig deeper? Yes. I checked my calendar. We have time. Wedding's 3 weeks out. That evening, Derek came by with takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on my balcony, the city lights spreading out below us like scattered gems. He reached for my hand, squeezed it gently. We're so close, he said, smiling that smile that used to make my heart skip. I took a slow sip of wine, thinking about Mr. Alvarez's findings. 3 weeks, I replied, keeping my tone warm and excited. Just like a bride should sound. Looking back, I wonder if he heard anything in my voice that gave me away. But then again, people usually hear what they want to hear. And Derek wanted to hear a woman too in love to ask questions. 2 days crawled by like molasses in January. Every time my phone buzzed, I checked to see if it was Mr. Alvarez. When his name finally lit up my screen, I ducked into my office and locked the door. You better sit down for this, Aisha. He said no preamble. My stomach dropped. I'm sitting. The details poured out like acid. Margaret hadn't just mortgaged her house. She'd mortgaged it twice. The first time was 3 years ago, a standard refinance. But the second, that came with balloon payments she couldn't possibly make on her retirement income. Delinquency notices had started piling up 6 months back. But here's what made my blood run cold, Mr. Alvarez said. Your man, Derek? He's been dipping into his school's PTA fund, listed as temporary advances in their books. My hand tightened on the phone. How much? $250,000. The room tilted. I grabbed my desk edge, steadying myself. Remember those moments when your whole world shifts? When everything you thought was solid turns to sand under your feet? That's what it felt like. The timing lines up, Mr. Alvarez continued. Right. After his mother's second mortgage payment started coming due. He's been covering her bills with school money. I closed my eyes, seeing all the pieces click into place. The rushed wedding timeline, the prenup's asset grab clauses, the constant talk about family financial planning. I'm sending you everything, he said. Bank records, property liens, fund transfers, all documented, all verifiable. Thank you, I managed. I'll need time to process this. After hanging up, I sat there, staring at my office wall. The lunch in my stomach felt like lead. That night, sleep came in broken pieces, my mind spinning through every conversation, every casual mention of money. You ever notice how hard it is to act normal when your world's falling apart? But that's exactly what I had to do. Keep smiling, keep planning, keep playing the happy bride while my heart turned to stone. Next morning, Derek caught me looking tired at breakfast. Everything okay, baby? I gave him what he wanted, a half-truth wrapped in vulnerability. Just overwhelmed with all this wedding stuff, I said, pushing my untouched eggs around. I think I need to breathe before signing anything. You understand, right? He reached across the table, squeezed my hand. Of course. Take your time. 2 days later, he came to me with an idea. What if we set up a joint account for wedding expenses? His smile was so sincere I almost forgot what I knew. Make it easier to pay vendors, track costs. I nodded slowly, like I was considering it for the first time. That sounds practical. Maybe start with $50,000 for deposits and such? Perfect. He beamed. Then I dropped my hook. We should put it in you and your mother's names, I said carefully, since she's handling most of the planning. Your Uncle Calvin mentioned something about efficiency in financial matters? That's actually really thoughtful of you. The relief in his voice made my skin crawl. I had Mr. Alvarez draft the account paperwork, building in every traceability clause known to banking. When the documents came back, I signed without hesitation. Transferred the $50,000 while Derek watched, smiling that proud smile of his. The moment he left, I started documenting. Screenshots of the transfer, PDFs of the account structure, timestamps on every email, every text about the money. Mr. Alvarez verified each step, building our paper trail brick by brick. That evening, I stood in my home office, staring at the countdown I'd pinned above my desk. 21 days glared back at me in bold red numbers. 21 days until the wedding. 21 days to finish what they'd started. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Thank you for trusting me. Can't wait to call you my wife. I set the phone down without answering. Trust had nothing to do with it anymore. The next morning hit different. You know that clarity that comes after a long night of wrestling with hard truths? That's where I was. I'd spent hours staring at my ceiling, but when dawn broke, my mind was razor sharp. First call went to Mr. Alvarez. I need everything compiled, I told him. Every receipt, every transfer, every document that shows what they've been doing. Make it clear enough that even a first grader could connect the dots. You sure about this? He asked. The concern in his voice took me back to when he'd helped me sort through James's estate after the funeral. Always looking out for me, that one. More sure than I've been about anything since James died. He cleared his throat. Give me 48 hours. I'll build you an evidence package that'll make a federal prosecutor jealous. After hanging up, I squared my shoulders and headed to Margaret's for our weekly wedding planning breakfast. You ever had to sit across from someone who's trying to rob you and smile like everything's fine? Let me tell you, it takes everything you've got. These family traditions mean so much, I said, watching her butter her toast with precise strokes. I want to honor them properly. Her eyes lit up. Exactly what I was waiting for. "Oh, Aisha, dear. I'm so glad you're coming around." She reached across the table to pat my hand. "You know, once you're officially part of the family, we can move larger amounts into our shared accounts. Make everything smoother." I nodded, keeping my face neutral while my stomach churned. As soon as I got back to my car, I typed every word she'd said into my phone's notes app. Time-stamped and dated. The venue walkthrough was next. Derek played his part perfectly, the devoted fiancé, attentive to every detail. He held my hand, asked the staff thoughtful questions about setup times and parking arrangements. Sometimes I caught myself almost believing it again. Almost. "Baby, what about these flower arrangements?" he'd ask. Or, "Should we set up the dessert station here?" Each time I'd smile and say, "Let me think about it and email you my thoughts later." Never just agreeing verbally. Never leaving decisions unrecorded. Every single response went through email, creating that paper trail Mr. Alvarez had taught me to value years ago. By mid-afternoon, I was back in my office, reviewing Mr. Alvarez's preliminary findings. "See here?" He pointed at his laptop screen. "Every transfer from the joint account has both Derek and Margaret's digital fingerprints. The I-State account structure you insisted on? Perfect. They can't claim ignorance later." I watched as he pulled up document after document. Bank statements, transfer authorizations, email threads about family financial planning. The evidence mounted, page after digital page. "What about the PTA withdrawals?" I asked. "All documented. The school's accounting system isn't exactly Fort Knox. Every advance is right there, clear as day. When this hits, there's no wiggle room." I nodded, feeling that familiar weight in my chest. Put it all together. Make it bulletproof. Later that evening, I stood in my office, holding a thick manila envelope labeled Disclosure in my neat handwriting. Inside was everything. The annotated prenup, the bank records, the PTA documentation, all of it. I placed it carefully in my safe, right next to that original prenup they'd tried to force on me. The sound of the safe door clicking shut echoed in the quiet room. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing. Remembering James, how he'd always said, "Trust your gut, but verify your facts." If he could see me now. My office door creaked open. Derek stepped in, wrapped his arms around me from behind. "There's my beautiful bride," he murmured into my hair. "What are you doing in here so late?" I forced myself to lean back against him, fighting the urge to pull away. "Just finishing up some paperwork." 2 weeks left, he whispered, and I felt his smile against my neck. Just 2 more weeks until forever. I held my breath, letting it sit in my lungs until they burned. Because if I let it out, if I allowed myself to truly exhale, everything I was holding back might come spilling out with it. 7 days. Amazing how a number that small can feel like forever when you're playing chess with your heart. I was running on coffee and determination, checking my phone every 5 minutes for messages from either Margaret or Mr. Alvarez. Let me tell you something about keeping up appearances. It's exhausting work. Margaret called right after my morning site inspection. "Darling," she cooed, "we really should settle these vendor payments before the weekend. They're getting antsy about their deposits." I stirred my 3rd espresso of the day, buying seconds to think. "Of course, Margaret. What numbers are we looking at?" "Oh, just send another 50 to the joint account. We'll handle everything from there." Her voice had that honey-sweet tone that made my skin crawl. "I'll review the invoices first," I said, keeping my voice light. "Just good business practice, you understand." Before she could respond, Derek's call beeped in. Perfect timing. They were tag-teaming me now. "Baby," he started, not even saying hello. "We should move that extra $250 we talked about. For liquidity, you know? Make sure everything's smooth for the big day." My hands wanted to shake, but I steadied them against my desk. "It's quite a sum, honey. Maybe we should have Uncle Calvin look over the transfer terms. Keep everything proper." "Great idea." He jumped at it too quickly. "I'll have him email you something today." I hung up and texted Mr. Alvarez. "Watch for Calvin's email. I'm betting he gets greedy. 3 hours later, my inbox pinged. Uncle Calvin's message was a masterpiece of predatory legal writing. Clause after clause designed to tunnel straight into my company accounts after the wedding. Real subtle stuff, buried under words like mutual financial integration and spousal business interest alignment. You ever watch someone dig their own grave while thinking they're building? You a trap? That's exactly what this felt like. I forwarded it to Mr. Alvarez with just one word. Well? His response came back in minutes. This is it, the smoking gun. He's basically documented intent to defraud. Want me to come over? I did. We spent the next 4 hours in my office, assembling what we called the full disclosure acknowledgement. Every bank statement showing their transfers. Every PTA ledger entry where Derek had borrowed funds. Margaret's mortgage default notices, and the crown jewel, Uncle Calvin's emails laying out their whole plan in black and white. We need this notarized, Mr. Alvarez said, tapping the stack of papers. Multiple copies. I nodded, already pulling up my phone. I know a mobile notary. She can meet us tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. And the press release? Drafted, under embargo until wedding morning. I rubbed my temples. Already alerted my counsel to be available starting at 9 a.m. that day. Mr. Alvarez squeezed my shoulder. You're doing the right thing, Aisha. James would be proud. Later that evening, I met Derek at the venue for our final walkthrough. The string lights were up, twinkling like stars against the growing dusk. It could have been beautiful. Should have been beautiful. 1 week, baby, Derek said, pulling me close. His cologne, the one I'd bought him for Christmas, wrapped around me like a bittersweet memory. I made myself smile, made myself lean into his embrace one last time. 1 week exactly. Standing there under those lights, I thought about all the moments that lead us here. The Sunday dinners, the lazy mornings, the future we'd planned. But you can't build a life on quicksand, no matter how pretty the house looks from the outside. Everything's going to be perfect, he whispered. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't have to fake my reply. Because it was true, just not in the way he meant it. Yes, I said. Everything's going to be exactly as it should be. You know those hours when the world feels too quiet? When your own thoughts get so loud, they could wake the dead? That was me at 3 a.m, sitting at my kitchen table with a coffee cup I hadn't touched in an hour, staring at nothing. The house felt different in those dark hours. Bigger, emptier. Kind of like my heart was feeling right then. 6 days before what should have been my wedding, and there I was, wondering if I'd dreamed up every good moment, every laugh, every kiss, every promise. My stomach had been in knots for days. Couldn't remember the last real meal I'd had. The thought of food made me queasy, but it wasn't hunger keeping me up. It was the weight of what was coming. You ever notice how doubt hits hardest when you're alone? I kept seeing Derek's face, remembering how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Had it all been an act? 3 years of my life invested in what? A long con? The humiliation burned worse than any acid. The doorbell chimed softly at 3:20. Only one person would show up at that hour. Mrs. Turner stood on my porch, holding a thermos and wearing that calm expression that had gotten me through some of my darkest days after James passed. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. That's the thing about true friends. They know when to just show up. I keep second-guessing myself, I admitted, as she poured us both tea. The familiar scent of her special blend, chamomile, lavender, and something else she'd never reveal, filled the kitchen. What if I'm wrong? What if... Stop right there. Mrs. Turner's voice was gentle but firm. She pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. What does the paper say? I knew what she meant. The evidence, the bank statements, the emails, the cold, hard facts that couldn't be explained away by good intentions. The paper tells the truth, I whispered. And what did my Harold always say about truth? A smile tugged at my lips, despite everything. Harold Turner had been a court clerk for 40 years before he passed. Truth needs two things, I recited. Witnesses and paper. That's right. She tapped my hand. You've got both. The rest is just your heart trying to make peace with what your head already knows. I reached for my laptop, pulled up the action plan I'd drafted. Mrs. Turner leaned in, her reading glasses perched on her nose. My cursor hovered over the line I'd highlighted. Simultaneous release prevents spin. They can't twist it if everyone gets the truth at once, I said, more to myself than to her. Exactly. She nodded. You've thought of everything, child. Now you just need to trust yourself. My hands steady now. I opened my email. The final packets were ready. All the evidence, all the documentation, everything organized with military precision. I double-checked the timed send settings to my lawyer, then confirmed the embassy details. 2 education reporters had already expressed interest, their responses saved in my wedding day folder. I slipped venue access passes into an envelope and handed it to Mrs. Turner. She'd know exactly where the press needed to be. My phone buzzed. 4:15 a.m. A text from Derek. Can't wait to see you at the tasting tomorrow, baby. 5 p.m. sharp. I stared at his response. A heart emoji followed by a money bag. The irony wasn't lost on me. Click, screenshot, save to evidence folder. Mrs. Turner squeezed my hand. 3 days, she said softly. I glanced at my phone's calendar notification. 3 days until the wedding. 3 days until truth had its say. Thank you, I told Mrs. Turner. For everything. She gathered her thermos and stood. Just remember, you're not alone in this. Never were. After she left, I sat there watching the sun rise over my backyard. The sky turned from black to purple to pink, like a bruise healing in reverse. Maybe that's what truth does. Hurts like hell at first, but leads to healing if you let it. I'd chosen the balcony carefully. Something about height gives perspective, lets you see things clearer. The city spread out below us like scattered diamonds on black velvet, and I'd set up everything just so. The vintage champagne James and I had saved for our 10th anniversary, crystal flutes that caught the light just right, and one simple manila envelope. You know that calm that settles over you when you've planned something down to the last detail? That's how I felt, standing there in my silk wrap dress, waiting. The breeze carried hints of jasmine from the planter boxes. Margaret's suggestion, actually. Funny how even bad actors sometimes give good advice. Derek arrived right on time, looking sharp in his charcoal suit. He'd always had good timing. It was one of the first things that attracted me to him. The way he could read a room, know exactly when to smile or nod or squeeze your hand. Tonight was no different. There's my beautiful bride, he said, pulling me close. His cologne, the expensive one I'd given him for Christmas, wrapped around us both. I poured the champagne, letting the bubbles settle before handing him a flute. I thought we could handle one last bit of paperwork, I said, keeping my voice light. So nothing hangs over us tomorrow. He laughed, that rich sound I'd once trusted completely. More papers? Baby, we've signed enough trees to start a forest. I slid the single page across the glass table. The title stood out in bold letters. Full disclosure acknowledgement. Just a formality, I said, using his own words from weeks ago. For family peace, complete transparency. He skimmed it, still smiling, until his eyes caught on certain phrases. That's when I saw it. The slight tightening around his jaw, the way his fingers tensed on the crystal stem. Before he could speak, the balcony door slid open. Margaret stood there, perfect as always in her designer pantsuit, but something in her expression told me she'd been watching, waiting for this moment. I thought I might find you two out here, she said, her voice honey-sweet with underlying steel. Derek, dear, I brought the original paperwork for Aisha to sign, the one we discussed. I took a slow sip of champagne. Of course, Margaret. We'll handle everything, but we sign this one first, then everything else. Uncle Calvin appeared behind her, his lawyer's smile firmly in place. Well, more contracts? I do love a thorough approach. He reached for the pen I'd set out. A Mont Blanc, because details matter. 8 a.m. sharp, I said, sliding the notary appointment card onto the table. We can all meet at the Riverside office, get everything witnessed properly before the ceremony. Derek picked up the disclosure document, folding it with careful precision. Let me review this with Mom tonight, he said. His voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor in his hands. Just to be thorough. I turned to face the city lights, letting them blur slightly in my vision. The champagne tasted like memories now, of other nights, other promises, other truths finally faced. 8 a.m. then, I whispered, not turning around. Behind me, I heard their footsteps retreat, the door slide shut. The city hummed below, traffic and sirens and life moving forward, same as it always did. Same as it would tomorrow, no matter what happened. I lifted my glass to the lights, a silent toast to inevitability. Wedding mornings are supposed to start with butterflies and best wishes. Mine began with a sunrise that painted the sky the color of old bruises and a phone that stayed stubbornly silent. You ever notice how silence can be louder than any alarm? I dressed with the same care I'd use preparing for a major contract signing. And wasn't that exactly what this was? My charcoal pantsuit whispered quality, my gold jewelry caught the light just right, and my natural curls were twisted into the same neat style I'd worn to close. My first $1 million deal. Some battles are won before they begin, just by knowing who you are when you walk in. The office felt different at 7:30 a.m., like it was holding its breath. Mrs. Turner was already there, steady as sunrise, her Bible in her lap and 2 cups of coffee on my desk. Neither of us spoke much. Some moments don't need words. You sleep any? She finally asked, passing me my cup. About as much as you'd expect. I logged into my email, checking the queued messages one last time. The subject lines sat there like loaded guns. Urgent, financial disclosure, Monroe Construction PTA Fund investigation addressed to every school board member, and press release, financial impropriety, local school principal, to the 2 reporters who'd been circling this story for days. Mrs. Turner moved to stand behind me, her hand warm on my shoulder. 8 o'clock's coming. I nodded, watching the minute hand tick forward. The exhibits were all there, attached and organized. Bank statements showing the PTA fund withdrawals, Margaret's mortgage default notices, records of every dime they'd moved from that wedding account. Truth, lined up in neat little rows of black and white. 7:55 came and went. No texts, no calls. 8 o'clock struck. The notary sat in her chair, checking her watch. 8:05, nothing. At 8:10, my phone buzzed. Margaret's text popped up. Running late. Sign at venue. I could almost hear her voice, that sugar-coated steel. My fingers moved across the keys. Of course, simple, professional, final. 5 minutes later, I looked at Mrs. Turner and nodded once. My finger hovered over the mouse for just a heartbeat. Funny how such big moments can hang on such small movements. Then clicked, send. Time to go, Mrs. Turner said, gathering her purse. Your chariot awaits. The drive to the venue was quiet, but not heavy. You know that moment when you've stepped off the cliff and gravity hasn't quite caught up? That's what it felt like. Peace, right before the fall. We saw the news vans before we turned the corner. 3 of them, cameras already rolling, reporters checking phones with that particular intensity they get when a story's breaking. My driver, James's cousin, Marcus, who'd stayed loyal through everything, eased the car to a perfect stop right at the front steps. Mrs. Turner squeezed my hand once, hard. Showtime, baby girl. I stepped out into the morning air just as one of the reporters, young guy, pressed suit, hungry eyes, looked up from his phone and read aloud, Full disclosure, PTA funds, mortgage defaults, wedding account. The cameras swung my way like flowers tracking the sun. Questions started, flying, but I didn't rush. Just smoothed my jacket, adjusted my purse strap, and walked to the heavy venue doors with the same measured pace I used in boardrooms. Pulling them open, I paused. The reporters had crowded closer, microphones thrust forward, questions tumbling over each other. But they all went quiet when I turned to face them. Good morning, I said, voice clear and calm as church bells. Inside, I could already hear phones ringing. Sometimes Karma needs a little help with her timing. You know what fascinates me about high-end bridal suites? The soundproofing. From inside that cream-colored cocoon, you'd never guess there was chaos brewing outside. But even thick walls couldn't muffle the buzz of phones going off like angry hornets in every corner. The venue coordinator, Sarah, bless her professional heart, kept glancing at her tablet, then at me, then back at her tablet. Her face had that particular look people get when they're watching a train wreck in slow motion but trying to stay polite about it. "Ms. Monroe," she finally managed. "Mr. Thompson we haven't received his arrival notification yet." "I expect we won't," I said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from my sleeve. "Ever notice how keeping your hands busy helps keep your voice steady?" My phone lit up with a text from Jerome, my lead counsel. School. Board chair confirms PTA withdrawals. Emergency session called for 2 p.m. Need statement? I'd had that statement ready for weeks, sitting in my drafts like a loaded gun. 3 pages of pure fact, every accusation backed by footnotes and exhibits, written in the same calm tone I used for annual reports. 2 clicks, and it was on its way to Jerome with a simple note. Release to all inquiries. Mrs. Turner moved through the suite like she owned it, passes for security in her steady hands. "Cameras stay outside," she told Sarah. "Except for designated areas. We're keeping this dignified." That last word had weight to it, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're worth. Sarah's tablet buzzed again. She swallowed hard. "Ms. Monroe, Mrs. Thompson is in the parking lot. She seems distressed." I moved to the window, the one that overlooked the circular drive where I'd planned to make my bride's entrance. Instead of seeing my wedding day, I watched my almost mother-in-law pace tight circles, phone pressed to her ear, free hand cutting through the air like she was conducting a symphony of panic. Remember those old westerns where you could see the posse coming by the dust cloud on the horizon? That's what it was like watching the first news van roll up, then the second. Margaret saw them too. I've got to give her credit. She tried to maintain that steel-spined society lady pose for about 30 seconds. Then the cameras started swinging her way, and all that starch went right out of her spine. She sagged against a Mercedes, hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from escaping. You'd think I'd feel something watching her world collapse. Satisfaction, maybe. Or guilt. But all I felt was tired. The kind of tired you get after finishing a major project, when the weight lifts and you realize just how heavy it had been. A soft knock at the door made me turn. "Floral delivery," Sarah announced, her voice professionally neutral despite the circus developing outside. "Place it there," I said, not bothering to look at the roses I'd ordered weeks ago. Funny how things that seemed so important before could become just props in the background. My phone lit up again. Derek's name flashed on the screen, the same way it had hundreds of times before. But this wasn't about dinner plans or good morning texts. This was the call that would end one chapter and start another. I let it ring twice, giving myself time to remember every lie, every manipulation, every moment he chose his mother's schemes over honest love. Mrs. Turner moved closer, silent support at my shoulder as I tapped the green button. "Yes?" I kept my voice, even, the same tone I'd use accepting a routine business call, because that's all this was now. The final transaction in a failed merger. "Baby, please." Derek's voice cracked through the speaker. "We need to meet, just you and me. We can fix this." I watched another news van pull into the lot. "Fix what exactly?" "The media's going crazy. They're saying this could ruin my career, Aisha, my whole life. You don't understand what you're doing." You ever notice how people who've wronged you suddenly want to explain things when they're caught? I let the silence stretch, remembering all those nights I'd spent building my case while he thought I was planning centerpieces. "The documents speak for themselves," I said finally. "They've been speaking for weeks. You just weren't listening." Mrs. Turner touched my arm and held up her phone. The school board notification glowed bright. "Emergency. Session results. Termination vote. Principal Derek Thompson. effective immediately. Below it, a string of replies from board members expressing their profound disappointment. My phone buzzed with an email from Jerome. Court order secured. Joint account frozen pending investigation. Traceability clauses activate. Funds revert to listed owners D. Thompson and M. Thompson. I smiled slightly, remembering how Uncle Calvin had praised those efficient account structures he hadn't bothered to read carefully. A knock at the door made me turn. Sarah stood there, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "Ms. Monroe, there are reporters downstairs requesting a statement. They're asking about the PTA funds and everything else." "Later," I said, moving toward the balcony doors. The morning air felt clean, carrying the scent of roses from the garden below. Mrs. Turner followed me, out, her presence steady as always. "You evil, calculating—" Margaret's voice exploded from the stairwell before she did. She burst onto the balcony, face flushed above her mother-of-the-groom corsage. "You've destroyed this family. After everything we—" I pulled the disclosure acknowledgement from my folder, the one she'd refused to sign last night, and held it out. "Everything you what, Margaret? Planned? Arranged? Here, I've highlighted the interesting parts for you. The mortgage defaults, the PTA withdrawals, the creative accounting." Her phone pinged. She grabbed it like a lifeline, then went pale. I didn't need to see the screen to know it was the lean notice Jerome had scheduled for 9 a.m. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Right on time, the process servers would be hitting the front entrance now with their stack of court orders and civil complaints. My phone vibrated. Derek again, but a text this time. "Please don't do this." I looked at those 3 words for a long moment. 3 words just like, "I love you," or "Trust me, baby." Amazing how little they meant now. "I already did," I typed back, then turned off notifications. Margaret's knees gave out, and she sank into one of the white chairs we'd arranged for the ceremony. "You could have just signed the prenup," she whispered. "Everything would have been fine." "No," I said quietly. "Everything would have been buried. There's a difference." Another ping from her phone made her flinch. Through the balcony doors, I could see Sarah directing security to manage the growing press crowd. The morning I'd planned as a bride was transforming into something else. Not a wedding, but maybe a different kind of justice. Mrs. Turner stepped forward, her voice carrying that church lady steel that could stop sinners in their tracks. "I believe it's time for you to leave, Margaret. Your lawyers will be wanting to speak with you." Downstairs, camera flashes sparked like summer lightning. In my pocket, my phone kept buzzing with message after message that I wouldn't read. I'd said everything I needed to say in receipts and records, in bank statements and board minutes. Sometimes the loudest truth is printed in black and white, 1 page at a time. 2 days can feel like 2 years when you're watching justice unfold. I sat in my office that Wednesday morning, reading headlines I'd helped create. School board terminates principal following PTA fund investigation. Wedding revelations lead to multiple financial inquiries. Community leaders express shock at Thompson family disclosures. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't mind. After months of playing chess while they thought I was playing checkers, the endgame felt quiet. Almost anticlimactic, if you want the truth. You know what's funny about karma? It doesn't need your help once it gets rolling. The school board's press release landed first, a 3-page document that managed to say profound disappointment in about 12 different ways. They'd scheduled a parent meeting for next week to discuss restoration of trust and funds. Jerome called around 10. Margaret's house. Enters seizure proceedings today. The mortgage company's not playing nice. They're citing pattern of deception in their filing. He paused, then added, "The Community Foundation wants a statement." "Send them what we discussed," I said. 1 line, "Records speak to accountability." "That's all?" "That's enough." I stood at my window, watching workers install the new sign outside. Phoenix Development stretched across the glass entrance in clean gold letters. Felt right, seeing that name go up. Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something true. A text buzzed through. Derek. I hadn't blocked him. Somehow watching those messages pile up unanswered felt like its own kind of justice. This one just said, "Why?" I didn't reply. He knew why. The bank statements knew why. The PTA ledger knew why. His mama's double-mortgaged house knew why. Mrs. Turner arrived around 4, carrying a bottle of champagne like it was Sunday communion wine. "Thought we might need this," she said, setting it on my desk. She'd been there through every step, my steel-spined guardian angel in sensible shoes. "They're saying ugly things about me at the church," I told her, though we both knew I didn't care. She snorted. "Let them talk. Truth don't need defending. It just needs daylight." The sun started setting while we worked, painting the city in shades of gold and promise. I grabbed 2 glasses and led Mrs. Turner out to the balcony. Below us, the new sign caught the light like a declaration. "To Phoenix Developments," I said, pouring the champagne. The bubbles caught the sunset, turning each glass into its own little firework. Mrs. Turner settled into one of the chairs, adjusting her cardigan against the evening breeze. "You know what I love about Phoenixes?" she asked. "They don't ask permission to rise. They just do it." Across town, I could see the wedding venue's string lights coming on, probably for someone else's celebration now. Funny how something can look so different from a distance. 2 weeks ago, those lights had seemed like a promise. Now, they were just lights. I pulled the last document from my folder, the final page of our story. The disclosure acknowledgement Derek and Margaret had refused to sign, now stamped with court dates and case numbers. Evidence of a trap they'd set for themselves. "You did good, girl," Mrs. Turner said softly. "You did right." I slipped the paper back into its folder and set it aside. The city stretched out before us, familiar but different now, like looking at an old photograph and suddenly noticing new details. "You want to know what I learned from all this?" I asked, turning to Mrs. Turner with a smile that felt as steady as bedrock. She lifted her glass. "Tell me." I watched the sunset paint everything in shades of possibility and spoke the truth I'd paid to learn. "Never let love blind your worth." Mrs. Turner clinked her glass against mine. Amen to that. The champagne tasted like victory, sweet, but with a bite that reminded you how you earned it. Below us, the city was coming alive with evening lights, each one a star in a constellation of second chances.